LA.B. But me, your man, Louie T. Welcome to the command post. You know what it is. Post up. Take command. Of course, I'm your commander-in-chief, Louie T. Thank you for joining me. So yesterday on Commander's Nightly News, I told you that I had an issue accessing DQ's presser. And I wanted to give a quick shout out. Let me track down the individual who blessed me last night because I was struggling. I was on a struggle bus with the with his presser. I knew it had happened. All the media members were talking about it and giving us bits and pieces from it. I don't want that shit. I want the whole thing, right? Let me consume it. Let me draw my own inferences from what was said. And it wasn't anywhere. I couldn't find it. And so I want to give a quick shout out to DC Finest 14. DC Finest 14 for telling me where I could access the press conference. DC Finest 14 said that this is something that they've done a number of times this season. I've never had issues with the actual visual, press conference where I could see it. I don't mind just listening to it, but this is the first time that it wasn't anywhere. Sometimes they'll have it on YouTube, sometimes they'll have it on the team website, and sometimes they'll play this gymnastics game with you where you got to go and search it out. It might be on X this time only, right? Like, so you just got to figure out where it is. But this is the first time where it wasn't anywhere. It wasn't on X. It wasn't on Facebook. It wasn't on the team website. It wasn't on the Facebook page or the YouTube channel. And so I was like, damn, I guess I'm not going to be able to access it, huh? And shout out to DC Finance 14 for telling me where I needed to go to access the audio version of what DQ said. It was 24 minutes long. It's one of the longest pressers DQ has had this season. So he had a lot to say, obviously. And, we'll get into probably a little bit more of what was said on Commander's Nightly News later on tonight. But I did want to bring up a couple of interesting topics that he brought forth. And then I want to talk about the potential for the Commanders to be flexed to Sunday Night Football in Week 17 versus the Atlanta Falcons. We'll talk about that here in a bit. But I want to start with some of the things DQ said. So I want to clean up something I said yesterday. I think I said Jeremy Reeves. And this is what happens when I don't get to listen to the actual press conference. I make little stupid mistakes. And I think I said Jeremy Reeves yesterday and that we didn't know the status of Jeremy Chin. That's false. Jeremy Reeves is perfectly fine. Jeremy Chin is the one in concussion protocol. So DQ started out by saying both Jeremy Chin and Zach Ertz are both in concussion protocol. And, that leads me to believe that both of them will miss Sunday's game versus the Philadelphia Eagles. He did talk about Tyler Biadasz. I mentioned that yesterday, so I don't really need to belabor that point, but he's going to be fine for Sunday, barring any kinds of setbacks for the Eagles game. But he talked about the kicking game with Zane Gonzalez. He said that, the plant foot was an issue. They thought he was close to going, but they just felt like it was best to keep him out, let him rest up a bit. They just didn't feel comfortable with that plant foot not being 100%. So they went with the healthy kicker, Greg Joseph. Obviously, he was not clutch when we needed him to be. We'll say that. And DQ, you could tell, not very happy with him missing that 54-yarder, as he should have been disappointed because we should not have been in that position. And you can't just put it all on Greg Joseph. We had opportunities to not be in that position. Obviously, we've kind of gone over all of those things exhaustively as to how we could have avoided being in a close game at the end against Spencer Rattler and the New Orleans Saints. But we made that thing a lot tougher than it needed to be. But as DQ said after the game, we had to go longer, harder, stronger for 60 minutes than the Saints did, and we did that. And we had to go until the clocks all hit zero, and we did that. Game ball went to Marshawn Lattimore. I'm pretty sure you all saw that. You know, he didn't have anything to say. They tried to get him. You know, every time somebody gets a game ball, they always go speech, and most guys don't like speaking in front of people. And he was like, "Look, I just got here. I'm not saying shit." So he didn't say anything, but he did break the team down. So that was pretty dope. That he was able to go back to New Orleans against a team that traded him away and get the dub. You know, he wanted it bad, so I was glad that he was able to get that done. But he talked about Marshawn Lattimore, as a matter of fact, and how you know when a guy isn't targeted. This guy played 53 snaps, 35 of which were pass plays, and none of them came in his direction. Not a single one. And so when you get that type of respect, he's like, you had a really good game. Like the least amount of attention that you garner, the more you had a good game, essentially. So now Joe Witt Jr. knows, I can't say that that's going to be, and I said this yesterday, that won't be the approach when you go up against quarterbacks who are a little bit more stubborn, or they got better receivers and they're just confident that their guy can win. You're not going to shy away from a corner just because of his reputation. The Eagles have A.J. Brown and Smitty. I'm pretty sure Jalen Hurts is going to feel confident that those guys can make plays for him. So if they get one-on-one against Marshawn Lattimore, he may take it, right? So don't expect this to be the same, next week against the Eagles. But you do know that there will be very few attempts to that left side if that's where he's posted up. And if that is in fact the case, then I feel like you need to be more aggressive on the right side of the field in terms of how you roll coverage, how you play up on receivers, especially in short yardage situations. Too often we find ourselves playing off 7 yards on 3rd and 4, and they run a 4-yard out cut, a 5-yard out cut, get the first down, and I'm like, you don't have to do that anymore. I get it. Earlier in the season, you didn't want to get beat, and Joe Witt Jr. told us many times, I haven't been protecting the corners. And he hasn't been. You watch the film and it's one-on-one on the outside. And that's why he's playing 10, yards off, 7 yards off. Because there ain't no help over the top. Or if it is, it's single high safety, and there ain't no guarantee he's getting over there in time. You can be more aggressive when it's a too high shell, or if you can ignore one side of the field and just have the safety shade over to your side, well, you got help over the top, so you can be super aggressive. You can jump routes. You can be aggressive, come up, try to take the ball away, take chances, because I got the safety over the top on my side. So I think that's something that I would like to see. But there's also a drawback to that. If they run verticals, right, they run a tight end right at your safety, and then they run a go route on that side, you got to pick, right? You can midpoint those two things, but the likelihood is you're going to have to pick, and whichever one threatens you first, which is usually going to be that seam route, safety's probably going to go with that. Now you're one-on-one, and if you were too aggressive thinking you had help, and now that help isn't there, so you can find yourself getting into a little bit of a jam and a bind if the offense calls up the right play to kind of dictate how your safety might play it. So anyway, it just feels good to have a corner. We haven't had one of these in a very long time. It's almost like I don't know how to act. I don't know how to be, because we got one of them ones at the cornerback position now. We got one of those dudes that you have to respect. And again, just not used to that, right? It's been a long time. Probably D'Angelo Hall was the last one. I think we already came to that conclusion that D'Angelo Hall was the last one of these dudes where you felt like, hey, at any point, if you get reckless, you might have to pay for that. It's been a while, been a long time. What was D'Angelo's last year? Like 2013, maybe? Like, it's been a long time. So, DQ talked about something that really piqued my interest. So, I told you yesterday that I was extremely pleased with Dyami Brown. And DQ was as well. And he talked about Dyami Brown. He said, I really felt his speed on the little touch pass, on the little, pseudo jet sweep, but it was a touch pass that he had in the first quarter. He was like, I love his competitiveness going up for that ball that got called back, on the Allegretti penalty. But He really went up and competed for that ball, went and got it. It's a big catch, and it was. He had another catch, a comeback on a 2nd and 20 that made it 3rd and 8 that we converted to Crowder, which is a great transition. Crowder, he talked about Crowder making that catch on that 3rd down, which was a big one. That was a zinger from JD. I mean, that was a frozen rope. He put some hot sauce to go on that thing, on that 3rd down and 8. And Crowder, tried to drop it because he got hit. That shit was bobbling, but the defender actually hit it and pinned it against Crowder's chest. And credit Crowder for holding on to that thing. But he praised Crowder, for coming in and getting the job done. And and then he loves him some OZ. My goodness. He loves him some OZ. I can tell you this much. I've been talking about this because I think this is a big deal. We've kept 5 receivers on the active roster all year long. We haven't had a game this season where we've kept more than 5. And it's been pretty simple because there's been no Jamison Crowder since and it really hasn't mattered because even when Crowder was healthy, the only game he played in was week 1 because Noah Brown wasn't active. Once Noah Brown was active in week 2, Crowder was the odd man out essentially. And then Crowder, I think, was up in week number 4, I think, against Arizona, somewhere around there, maybe week 6 against Baltimore, but he got hurt. And then we hadn't seen him. So it made it easy on them to not carry, any extra receivers. Let me say this. I don't think they've carried 6 at any point this season. They could have, but I don't think they have. But in saying that, they have a decision to make coming up. And he loves OZ. He talked about OZ's ability to drop step again. He talked about OZ's ability to catch and get yards after the catch because he had a nice little wide receiver screen. He should have had a touchdown, but that was negated by a penalty. He had a nice slant late in the game when we thought we were putting it away on offense that put us in the field goal range before all of the foolishness happened with the penalties and whatnot. But he caught the pass right around the 30-yard line. And that was another dot from JD where you go, damn. I mean, Chase Young's arms are in the air. That ball goes right around his arm. There's a defender right there. He zings it past him too and right into the arms of OZ. I mean, you couldn't have walked up and handed that ball to OZ any better. So he was really impressed with OZ. Guys just stepped up at that receiver position, right? But you know who he wasn't happy about? That he didn't come out and say I wasn't happy with him, but he was asked about the 3rd and goal from the 1 play that failed. And he said it was a boot that, that edge has to be sealed by the receiver. And, he didn't say the receiver, but the edge needs to be sealed. And he said that wasn't on JD or the offensive line. Okay. We know who missed the block. We know it was Luke McCaffrey. And I can tell you this. A lot of offensive snaps in this game against New Orleans. 78, I believe, to be exact, if I'm not mistaken. Damn near 80, I know that much. That's what happens when you have 41 minutes of time of possession. A lot of snaps. You know how many snaps Luke McCaffrey played? We talked about this yesterday. Only 12. Now, I'm not telling you that he's going to be a healthy scratch because I'm going to be very interested. I am really going to be fixated on what they do at receiver. They may just go with 6, especially now that Ertz is hurt. I can't imagine them going with less than 3 tight ends. I expect them to have a 3rd tight end on the active roster come game day against the Eagles on Sunday. Just because of how we like to run offense, they're not going to be comfortable with anything less than 3 tight ends. Somebody said that Colson Yankoff is on IR. We haven't seen him in a while, so maybe he is on IR. If so, I'm pretty sure there's some other tight end on the practice squad that they can bring up. I don't know if Cole Turner's still here or not, but I'm pretty sure there's another tight end that they can bring from the practice squad up, and they will, because I can't see them going without, you know, a third tight end. But, you know, Cole Turner defeats the purpose of having a third tight end because he really doesn't offer you any value anywhere else. He's not a dominant special teams player like Colson Yankoff was down there hitting folks on special teams. He's not doing that, and he doesn't block, which is part of the reason why, you know, he didn't make the team, why they ultimately went with Colson Yankoff over him. So um, I, he would kind of defeat the purpose of having that third tight end because he doesn't really do anything. But and clearly they're not going to throw him the ball. Like, they're not comfortable enough throwing him the rock. So um, it'll be interesting to see what they do. But if they keep 5 and somebody has to sit down, I can tell you DQ was not pleased with Luke McCaffrey not making that block, because that stopped them from scoring a touchdown there. And he without saying his name, he pretty much singled him out in the press conference. Like, you know, and you know, he wasn't trying to dump on him, but he made it clear that that wasn't on JD and that wasn't on the offensive line. That's a tough block to ask a wide receiver to have to make. But you got to position yourself to be able to make that block. I think Luke was a little bit too far out. He allowed too much space for Cam Jordan to split him and get inside and get to JD. He probably needed to close his split a little bit, be a little bit closer to the tight end so that he could wall him off better. Because that's the only job he really had on that play, was to make sure that that edge was clear for JD to be able to turn the corner. And he didn't do it, obviously. And that cost us an opportunity to score a touchdown. So, and I hate the play call, by the way. That doesn't change. And I'll go a step further. If you listen to DQ, he was not happy with the lack of effectiveness with the run game, which it wasn't, right? We felt like we left a lot of yards out there from a run game standpoint. And he made sure to say that it wasn't because Michael Dieter was out there. Because, you know, a lot of people tried to insinuate, oh, you know, no Tyler Biadasz, Michael Dieter's out there. That's why the run game wasn't as effective. And look, I'm not telling you, if you're saying that you're wrong, but there were opportunities for more yards in the run game. And I could tell you he would have liked to have seen B-Rob get an opportunity to run the football on that 3rd and 1, just by 3rd and goal from the 1, rather. Just by his response, you know, talking about his physicality and his ability to, you know, get in the end zone. And, you know, I thought he should have scored on the play before. And I thought that Allegretti kind of missed a little bit of a block there. And normally this season, that's been a play we've scored on. When we get that kind of hole with a pulling guard leading up through the hole, generally we finish that job right there and we get in. And I was shocked when I watched that play develop live. I thought, okay, that's a touchdown. And for him to get tackled at the 1, I was shocked. And a lot of the reason why he got tackled is because Allegretti really missed on that play. So I think I said all that to say this: if they're having to sit a receiver, I think it's Luke McCaffrey. He might be a healthy scratch for the first time this season as shit gets real. Now, I think before they sit Luke down, they're going to go with 6 before they sit him down. That's just my personal belief, is that they'll go with 6 wide receivers before they sit Luke McCaffrey down. Because Luke has established himself. Like, the more you can do, the more value you have on game day. Luke has established himself as a kickoff return man with no Austin Eckler back there. Luke is an option at receiver, obviously, but he's, you know, being utilized less and less in that role. But he's also proven to be a willing blocker, even though he did not get the job done. And one of the biggest roles that he's had this season is as a blocker, but he didn't get it done on that play. And maybe, you know, they look at that situation and they say, look, we could put somebody else back on kickoffs, you know, to return kickoffs if need be. But if they need that extra spot for, say, another linebacker or another corner or another tight end or whatever the case may be, he could be the odd man out because again, KJ Osborne is going to be active this week. And I think Crowder won him over with the way he played the receiver position as a veteran that JD can trust out there on the football field. And now not having Ertz, I think he wants another veteran out there. So I think he talked about how they're going to have to overcome the loss of Ertz, who more likely than not won't play on Sunday versus the Eagles. And, he talked about having to go to 2 running back sets. So you can see a lot of, 20 personnel with 3 receivers and 2 running backs and no tight ends on the field because of no Ertz. He talked about, seeing more 4 wide receiver sets, maybe. You could see like jumbo sets where it's 11 personnel, but the one tight end is, instead of a tight end, it's a tackle. Or it could be 12 personnel and you bring in Trent Scott as the other tight end along with John Bates. So there's going to be different ways that they try to utilize, the different packages now that Ertz might not be available. So I again, if they are sitting someone down, the guy right now that seems to have the least amount of value, he's not sitting OZ down. I can assure you of that. He loves him some OZ. He's not sitting down Diami. Diami's your number 2 receiver right now. KJ Osborne is going to be active against the Philadelphia Eagles for the first time as a Commander in week 16 against the Eagles. And obviously you got Terry. So Terry, Diami, KJ, OZ. And I think Crowder now is your primary punt returner, right? And a guy that they trust in the slot if need be. So where does Luke fit into all of this other than kick returner right now? And so I wouldn't be shocked to see Luke McCaffrey be a healthy scratch this week. We'll see. Interesting decision. I'm fascinated with that, probably more so than most people. But he was not happy with Luke McCaffrey. I can tell you that right now. He was not happy. They were not happy with him missing that block. That was his one job on that play, and they were not happy. So he was happy with. He singled out every other receiver. Talked about Crowder making plays. Talked about Diami showing up. Talked about OZ, and trust me, he omitted one receiver for a reason. Okay, so I'm not saying. I'm just saying. Let's get into, and we'll highlight some of the other things that he said tonight on the show. But I did want to come here and talk about those couple of topics, and then I wanted to talk about the prospects of the Commanders being flexed to Sunday Night Football with the Falcons winning last night. Not very impressively, I may add, but a win's a win's a win. Ours wasn't very impressive, and it still counts, and we're not giving it back, and neither are the Falcons. Falcons improved to 7-7. And I've talked about how 10 wins is the magic number, right? The goal isn't 10. The goal is 12, winning the rest of these games. The goal is to win more than 10 games for the first time since 1991, so 11. Like, the goal is not 10. But the magic number you have to at least get to is 10. But there is a scenario in which the Commanders win 10 games and don't get in, and it involves these Atlanta Falcons. So the Falcons game is a pretty effing big deal. Now, it can be rendered, useless if the Falcons slip up next week against the Giants before they get to us, which is plausible. This is a bad Falcons team. If you watched them last night, the one thing the Giants can still do is get to the quarterback. Now, it hasn't been as effective here of late without Dexter Lawrence in the middle, but if there's one thing they can still do is they can still affect the passer. So with Kirk Cousins being a statue back there, that could be the saving grace of this Giants team if they can stop the run, which is something they also struggle with. And I assume that the Falcons should be able to run the ball, and that should be enough to win the game. But again, with Kirk's penchant for turning it over, getting sacked, et cetera, who knows? But forget about all of that, right? That's going to be an important game unless the Falcons lose. And I just don't anticipate them losing to the Giants, right? That's a big, important game. So let's take a look at week 17 quickly, and I don't want to spend too much time on week 17, but I think it is worth mentioning because this Commanders game against the Falcons is going to be flexed to a spot because when the schedule came out, there were 5 games that were left in limbo so that the NFL could, place them in spots that made the most sense for the networks, right? So you got a triple header on Saturday in week 17, right? On NFL Network. So you want good games. You don't want duds. People don't want to watch bad football that is meaningless at the end of the season. That's why they left these 5 games open, hoping that these games would matter late in the season. Well, as you can see, there's some duds here that are going to be pushed to Sunday, at 1 o'clock. Like Colts, Giants, that can go to Sunday at 1 o'clock. Nobody wants to watch that, right? Chargers, Patriots, that could go to 1 o'clock on Sunday. Nobody wants to watch that. But Broncos, Bengals, right, could mean something depending on what happens with the Chargers and Broncos. If the Broncos beat the Chargers and the Bengals win out, the Chargers continue to lose, which probably won't happen because I think they have one more winnable game due to the Chargers. I think they play the Raiders in week 18, right? But, anyway, we don't mind watching Joe Burrow. We don't mind watching Joe Burrow. And the Broncos are fighting for a playoff spot. So that I would guess would be one of the Saturday games, right? Rams, Cardinals has playoff implications. I assume that will be one of the Saturday games. And then Falcons and Commanders, you would assume would be one of the Saturday games as well. Now, here's the kicker, though. Look at the Sunday night. So you see December 30th on Monday, Lions, 49ers, they're not touching that, all right? Lions are, fighting for the number 1 seed, fighting for their division. The Niners aren't the draw that they thought they were going to be this year. That was supposed to be a marquee late season matchup. It's not. But the Lions are still a good draw, and people want to see the Lions. So they're not going to touch that game. They have no reason to. But that Sunday night game, if you look above it, 8:20 Sunday night, Dolphins, Browns, nobody wants to watch that shit. And the NFL knows it. And that is their primary package game. Every week, Sunday night is the big game of the week. It is the biggest stage that the NFL has. They are not going to allow Dolphins, Browns to stay on that stage. Trust me. So you're looking at these 5 games that have not been placed yet. And you say to yourself, which one of those games makes the most sense on Sunday Night Football? Now, one of these games may not end up on Sunday night. They may instead elect to put Cowboys and Eagles on Sunday Night Football. That wouldn't shock me if they decided to do that. Right? Cowboys are playing much better football. If they beat Tampa Bay, Cowboys are playing good football. Eagles, depending on what happens, it doesn't matter. If they lose to us, they beat us. Whether they're riding an 11-game winning streak or we snapped it, still, good theater, Cowboys and Eagles, right? That could end up on Sunday Night Football. But I think the most likely, if you look at all these games, the most likely scenario is that they take 3 of these games and put them on Saturday. Broncos, Bengals, Cardinals, Rams, and probably Chargers, Patriots, because the Chargers are playing for something, right? And you put those 3 on Saturday, and you take that Falcons Commanders game and you put that on Sunday Night Football, because there's a chance that the Falcons improve to 8-7, and especially if the Commanders lose to the Eagles and drop to 9-6, that game is for a playoff spot. Essentially, that game is for a playoff spot, because if they come into they come into Northwest and beat us in week 17, having lost to the Eagles the week prior, and they then improve to 9-7, and we drop to 9-7, all they got to do is beat the Carolina Panthers the following week, and they're in over us as a wild card. Forget about the division. They're in as a wild card. And keep in mind, We don't own any tiebreaker over Tampa Bay. They beat us already head-to-head. So you want no smoke with the NFC South at all. Don't want to put yourself in that position, which is why winning 11 games is the easiest path to making the playoffs. But you can get in with 10 as long as you beat Atlanta. They're the only team that can stop us from getting in at 10. Which is why I've said over and over again, the magic number is 10, but you got to beat Atlanta. Now, if Atlanta beats themselves by losing to the Giants in week 16, then all of this becomes a moot point. But raise your hand if you think the Falcons are losing to the Giants. Raise your hand. As bad as they look, they're not losing to the Giants. Giants have other factors at work right now. They know what they're trying to do. They ain't going to mess it up on some meaningless week 16 action. Trying to help us out. That ain't they plan. So I think that Commanders-Falcons game can and will be flexed to Sunday night. And I think we're going to find that out today at some point. You know, today is the day where I think they start letting these teams know, because they need to know in advance what their schedule is like so they can start kind of setting their itinerary up for how they're going to go about their business. If I'm playing on Saturday, I need to know that I'm going to have a quick turnaround after week 16, and I got a short week 17, so I can adjust my schedule, right? So they're going to let these teams know as early as possible. I think they're going to swap out that Sunday night football game. I think they're going to make the Commanders-Falcons game Sunday night, and I think you're going to see 3 of these other games on Saturday on NFL Network. That's my guess. Tell me what you think in the comment section. Are you excited for that? This is what December football is all about, right? Big games, you know, a lot on the line. We put ourselves in this situation. If we beat Dallas, we're not having this conversation right now. We're probably already in the playoffs as we speak right now. But instead, here we are fighting for our lives, and we got a chance. If we beat Philadelphia this week, we're pretty much in the playoffs at that point. You know, you wouldn't be totally in, but you would be in, you would be totally in the driver's seat at that point, because even if you weren't able to beat Atlanta somehow, all you have to do the next week is beat Dallas. And again, I say all you had to do as if Dallas is some pushover, but you'd still have an opportunity to win and be in. You lose to Atlanta. If you lose to Philadelphia and then you lose to Atlanta, you don't control anything. You don't control the outcome of your season. You got to win, and then you need help. You got to win, and then you need help. We didn't come this far to be relying on anybody to do any favors for us. We played the way we played this season. We started this season 7-2, and we've won the amount of games we've won to get to this point to be able to do it ourselves. That's all you want at the end of a regular season, is to be able to say, I've done enough work to qualify for bonus football on my own. I'm on some Michael McDonald shit. On my own. Clinch a spot in the playoffs. On my own. We trying to be in the playoffs on our own. Well, we can take another step towards that this week against the Philadelphia Eagles. But I just thought I'd bring it up because I think today we're going to find out that the Commanders are either playing on Saturday or they're playing on Sunday Night Football. To me, it's a no-brainer. They're either on Saturday or they're on Sunday night. There's no way in my mind that after looking at those 5 games that they have the flexibility with, that we're going to end up as one of the games that they just say, you know what, we don't need it. Let's just put it on Sunday at 1 o'clock with the rest of them. There's no way. Of all of those games, you could argue Falcons at Commanders is the most appealing of those 5. So with that in mind, it's either a Saturday game, Saturday night, more likely than not, or it's Sunday night. That's my guess. You tell me what you think. Anyway, I digress. That's going to do it for me, your man Louie T, here on the Command Post. You know what it is. Post up. Take command. I look forward to chopping it up with you later on today for Commanders Nightly News. Also, I'll be live for the LouieTeeNetwork podcast and Commanders Kings live tonight on the Commanders Kings channel. Make sure you come chop it up with us We got a lot to discuss. We got to hear about everybody's emotions going through that Saints game, which was wild, and start to turn our attention to these damn, dirty, Dick Dastardly Philadelphia Eagles. So, um, looking forward to you guys joining us for that. But until then, I'm your man Louie T, signing off. Until next time, you guys have a good one. Take care.
LouieTeeNetwork.